Welcome back to Rainbow Magic Book Club. And today we are looking at the third book in the Weather Fairy series, Pearl the Cloud Fairy. She is book number 10 out of all of the Rainbow Magic books ever to be released. In this book, Pearl the Cloud Fairy is a little bit disappointed because she doesn't have her cloud feather. Let's see what magic is in store in this book by looking at the back of it. Pearl the Cloud Fairy is down in the dumps without her fluffy feather. Rachel and Kirsty need a ticklish plan to cheer her up. We don't need to go through Jack Frost's spell or the map because we did that yesterday. Chapter 1 is Missing Fidget. Missing Fidget. What's the weather like today? Kirsty asked Rachel Walker eagerly. She pushed back the duvet. Do you think there's magic in the air? Kirsty Tate was standing at the bedroom window, staring out over the garden. It seems like an ordinary day, she sighed, a disappointed look on her face. The sky's grey and cloudy. Never mind. Rachel jumped out of bed and went to join her friend. Remember what Tiana, the fairy queen, told us? Don't look too hard for magic, because the magic will find you, Kirsty finished with a smile. Rachel and Kirsty were good friends who shared a very special secret. They were best friends with the fairies. When Jack Frost had put a spell on the 7 rainbow fairies, scattering them far and wide, Rachel and Kirsty had helped them return to fairyland. Now Jack Frost was up to mischief again. This time with the Weather Fairies. And once more, the Fairy King and Queen had called on Rachel and Kirsty for help. Look at Doodle, Rachel pointed at the cockerel weather vane which sat on top of the old barn. Do you think he looks a bit happier now that he's got 2 of his feathers back? Kirsty nodded. Let's hope we find all his feathers before you go home, she replied. Then the weather in fairyland can get back to normal again. With his 7 magic tail feathers and the help of the Weather Fairies, Doodle the cockerel controlled fairyland's weather. But Jack Frost had sent his mean goblin servants to steal poor Doodle's feathers. Doodle chased the goblin thieves into the human world, but without his magic and away from fairyland, he found himself transformed into an ordinary rusty weather vane. Kirsty's dad had found him lying in the park and brought him to put him on the roof of the barn, never realizing what a magical creature Doodle really was. Meanwhile, the weather in fairyland was in a terrible muddle, and it would remain so until Rachel and Kirsty could give Doodle all his feathers back and send him home. Well, we've made a good start, said Rachel, beginning to dress. With the help of Crystal the Snow Fairy and Abigail the Breeze Fairy, we already found 2 feathers. The King and Queen had promised Kirsty and Rachel that each of the 7 weather fairies would come to help them whenever they were needed. Girls, are you awake? Kirsty's mum called them downstairs. Breakfast's ready. Come in, Kirsty shouted back. I wish we knew what Doodle was trying to tell us yesterday, said Rachel as she and Kirsty chatted downstairs. Each time one of Doodle's tail feathers had been replaced, the cockerel had barely come alive. The first time he squawked, "Beware." The second time he managed to get out the word Jack before becoming metal again. I'm sure it was something about Jack Frost, Kirsty said thoughtfully. But what? Maybe we'll find out if we find another feather and Doodle speaks to us again, Rachel suggested. The girls went into the kitchen. Mr. Tate was laying the table and Kirsty's mum was making toast. "Morning, you two," said Mr. Tate with a smile as the girl sat down. "What are you planning to do today?" To be honest, her dad's face is really weird and his eyebrows are like thick as caterpillars. Before Kirsty or Rachel could answer him, there was a knock at the back door. "I wonder who that can be," Mrs. Tate said, raising her eyebrows. "It's still quite early." "I'll get it," said Kirsty, who was nearest. She opened the door. Outside stood Mr. and Mrs. Twitching, the Tates' elderly neighbours. "Oh," Kirsty said. "Good morning," said Mr. Twitchit. "We're sorry to disturb you, but we were hoping you might have seen Fidget." Kirsty frowned, trying to remember if she knew Fidget the Twitching's fluffy tabby cat very well, but she hadn't seen her for the last day or two. "I'm afraid I haven't recently," she replied. "Oh dear," Mrs. Twidget said, looking upset. "She didn't come home for her dinner last night." "Come in and ask Mum and Dad," Kirsty suggested, opening the door wider. "Perhaps they've seen her." As Mr. and Mrs. Twitching walked into the kitchen, Kirsty blinked. Just for a moment she thought she'd seen strange wisps of pale smoke curling and drifting over the neighbours' heads. She glanced at Rachel and her parents, but they didn't seem to have noticed anything unusual. Kirsty shook her head. Maybe she was imagining it. On to chapter 2. Magic afoot. "Where was the last time you saw Fidget?" asked Kirsty's mum as she made cups of tea for the Twitchings. "Yesterday afternoon," Mrs. Twidget replied. "It's very worrying because she doesn't usually miss a single meal." "Kirsty and I could help look for her," suggested Rachel. "Good idea," Kirsty agreed, finishing off her cereal. "Let's go right away. And I'll check our garden and the barn," added Mr. Tate. As Kirsty and Rachel got up from the table, Kirsty stared extra hard at the Twitching's heads. She thought she could see wisps of smoke hovering there again, but they were so pale and misty it was difficult to be sure. "Rachel," Kirsty said quietly as they headed outside, "did you notice anything about the Twitchings?" Rachel looked puzzled. "What do you mean?" Kirsty explained about the wisps of smoke. "They were very faint. I'm not sure if I really saw them or not," she finished. "Do you think there could have been magic?" Rachel asked curiously. Kirsty felt a thrill of excitement. "Maybe," she said eagerly, "in which case we'd better keep our eyes open for magic as well as Fidget." The girls walked into the village, keeping a sharp lookout for the tabby cat, but there was no sign of her. "I hope Fidget isn't lost for good," Kirsty said anxiously, staring around her. "Oh!" Kirsty hadn't been looking where she was going, and she bumped into one of the villagers. "I'm so sorry," she said politely. The woman glared at her. "Why don't you be more careful?" she said grumpily, and hurried off. "Well," gasped Rachel, "that wasn't very nice." But Kirsty was looking puzzled. "That was Mrs. Hale, one of my mum's friends, and she's usually very nice," she replied. "I wonder what's wrong." Rachel nudged her. "Look over there," she whispered, Outside the post office, two men were arguing. They both looked very bad-tempered indeed. Then Mr. Burke, who ran the post office, came out to see what was going on. Kirsty was surprised to see that her usual jolly face was downcast. "There's something funny going on," she whispered to Rachel as he went into the park. "Everyone's in a miserable mood. Look at the children on the swings." Rachel stared at the children in the playground. They didn't seem to be enjoying their games at all. Every single one of them looked sad and sulky. They didn't even cheer up when the ice cream van arrived. The girls stopped at the park gate. "I think we've been all around Weatherbury and there's no sign of Fidget or what? I think the page has been folded." Yep, the page was folded. Sorry about that, guys. I didn't really notice that. Right, as I was saying, and there's no sign of Fidget anywhere, Kirsty sighed, glancing at her watch. "We'd better go home, Rachel. It's almost time for lunch." Rachel nodded. "We can always carry on searching later." The girls turned back towards the Tate's house. On the way, they passed the tiny village cinema. The Saturday morning show had just finished, and the audience was flooding out, just like everyone else. The people looked glum. "It must have been a sad film," Rachel whispered. "But it wasn't," Kirsty replied, frowning. "Look," she pointed out the poster outside the cinema. "This hilarious film is a must. You'll split your sides laughing." Rachel read, "Well, the audience definitely didn't find it very funny," Rachel pointed out. Look at their faces." Kirsty stared at the people, trudging gloomily out of the cinema. Suddenly her heart began to pound. There they were again. She could definitely see cloudy smoke drifting over the cinema growers' heads. Just she'd noticed it above her next-door neighbours. "Look, Rachel," she nudged her friend. "There's that smoke again." Rachel peered at the people, frowning in contraction. For a moment she thought Kirsty was seeing things, but then she spotted them too. Thin, wispy tails of smoke hovering above their heads of the cinema goers like little clouds. "It must be a fairy magic," Rachel said excitedly. "It could be," Kirsty agreed, her eyes lighting up. "We could be on the trail for another magic feather." The girls hurried home. When they entered the house, the first thing they noticed were the clouds hovering over Mr. and Mrs. Tate. "Did you find Fidget?" asked Kirsty's mum, who was sitting on the sofa reading a book. The little white cloud above her head was touched with pink, like a sunset cloud. "No," Kirsty replied, staring at the grey clouds which was over her desk. "Oh dear," Mr. Tate said, looking sad. "I think the goblin with the magic cloud feather is close by," Rachel whispered to Kirsty as they ate their sandwiches. Kirsty nodded. "After lunch, let's go up to my bedroom and plan our next move," she said. "These clouds are beginning to worry me." "Me too," Rachel agreed. As soon as they finished their food, the girls ran upstairs. Kirsty threw open her bedroom door. "Hello," called a tiny silvery voice. "I thought you were never coming." There, sitting on the windowsill and swinging her legs, sat Pearl the Cloud Fairy. Thank you so much for watching me read Pearl the Cloud Fairy. And sorry if I read like, okay, and I stopped a bit. It's because the pages kept moving weirdly because of the way I was holding the book. Don't forget to watch tomorrow's video when you see me read Goldie the Sunshine Fairy. Bye!